And good afternoon. You're listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios right here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today's March the 28th, 87th day of the year. Just 278 days remain to the year's over with. Holidays and observances. Now I'm just hitting the high points. Since you all said there were too many. It's International Women in Music Day. National Black Forest Cake Day. Wear a Hat Day. National Hot Tub Day. Respect Your Cat Day. National Something on a Stick Day. National Weed Appreciation Day. Barnum and Bailey Day. Eat an Eskimo Pie Day. I can get behind that. National Triglycerides Day. Virtual Advocacy Day. And Great British Spring Cleaning. Now, all that having been said, there's a couple of news stories you might be interested in. The judge that issued the rulings on deportation flights, including Wartime Act targeting gangs, continues to stick his nose into things that are really none of his business. Testimony hit back after a man was caught on video keying his Cybertruck. And skyscraper collapsed in a 7.7 magnitude earthquake. The State Department's going to absorb the remaining USAID programs as that independent agency is dismantled. They're going to retire USAID as an independent operation. Historically, it's functioned as an independent agency that worked to deliver aid to impoverished countries and developed assistance. President Trump appointed Secretary of State Marco Rubio to serve as acting administrator, amid concerns USAID didn't advance U.S. interest. It was basically a slush fund that, if you knew the right people, made the right phone calls, you got money. Kind of like going to Vegas. On an international scale. Well, Democrats are in a disarray in the wake of a disastrous MSNBC forum. These were Democratic Party insiders. The meeting went off the rail in Titanic style. It became nothing more than an anti-Trump forum. A Georgia mother went to Walmart. That trip involved a tug-of-war and an attempt to save her son. Georgia man tried to snatch him in a Walmart. He was 2 years old. Her name was Caroline Miller. Visited a Walmart in Ackworth with a 4-year-old daughter and 2-year-old son last week when the motorized wheelchair the family was using broke down in the pharmacy. Moments later, 56-year-old Mahindra Patel approached the family asking for help finding Tylenol. She said when she pointed her arm out this way to say that that's where it was, he reached down, put both his hands on her son, and grabbed him out of her lap. Well, she was able to break away with her son as Patel was allegedly holding on to the child. So they had a bit of a tug-of-war. Well, fitness guru Jake Steinfeld considers running for California governor. He lost everything in the wildfires because of the incompetence of California leadership. Another judge appointed by Reagan ordered 2 trans inmates back to the women's prison. Trump's Department of Justice says this injunction is the latest example of an activist judge attempting to seize power. They seem to think their personal views trump the law. Now, President Trump signed an executive order mandating inmates live in facilities corresponding to their biological sex. Well, this particular judge says, oh no, he's got a better idea. His personal beliefs trump the executive orders. Democratic candidates caught on camera applauding notorious anti-Semites' violent rhetoric, urging violence against white folks. Progressive Newark Mayor Ras Baraka, one of the top Democratic candidates for a New Jersey governor, was caught on video applauding and embracing radical Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan. He called white people demons and called for violence. Now, if to be perfectly frank, if a white person had done that, there'd be lynching in the streets and federal agents would show up at his door. Well, armored vehicles have been deployed to the U.S.-Mexico border as a result of the cartel flexing its muscles against law enforcement. The HUD chief put illegal aliens living in government-funded housing on notice. It's not going to be a thing of the future. Americans are our only priority, he said. Warned illegal immigrants living in government-funded housing that they need to make other arrangements. It's not acceptable. We're not going to have it anymore. I mean, under President Biden, it was America last. And all you have to do is look at what's happened to see my point. Well, the Ivy League anti-Israel ringleader is fighting being detained. He should be allowed to go spew his hateful rhetoric any place he wants to. Now, let's see if there's anything else. Chicago has been dubbed America's murder capital. Democratic leaders are demonizing the police, doing everything they possibly can to encourage the migrants. And the peanut gallery is tuning up. Well, Suzanne Summers' husband creates an AI twin of his wife, modeled after the Three's Company character. She died in 2023 from breast cancer. Well, on that note, we've been talking about a lot of topics. This, I just lost my notes. Well, we're going to talk about what I might call murder in paradise. You know, especially students. During breaks and vacations, they want to go to the world's most exclusive resorts or take romantic cruises. They maybe walk on beautiful beaches that are supposed to promise fun, escape, and relaxation. Unfortunately, as we're going to be discussing, they might check in with enthusiasm. Quite often, they check out in body bags. In the Caribbean playground of Aruba, young woman's disappearance baffled police for decades. And then her killer finally came clean. One woman's birthday cruise came to an end when her husband calmly admitted to other passengers, "She's dead. I killed her." New bride on her honeymoon died when scuba diving off Australia's Great Barrier Reef. Apparently nobody could save her. Maid at the Fiji resort seen in the movie Blue Lagoon opened a guest room door to find a crime scene. We got the case of a jilted boyfriend who slaughtered 5 people in an exclusive Australian ski resort. In each case, these are fabulous settings. The height of exclusivity. Only to become the scenes of truly murder in paradise. Well, the first story made all the news shows. Stunning young lady. Name of Natalee Holloway. Last seen at Carlos and Charlie's. May 29, 2005. At about 1:30 in the morning. Almost 20 years after she disappeared in Aruba, her suspected killer finally confessed what he had done. It was a day her family thought would never arrive. October 18, 2023, in Birmingham, Alabama. In the courthouse, not too far from her high school. The major suspect in her 2005 disappearance admitted publicly he killed her. Wearing an armed jail uniform and confined in shackles, Joran van der Sloot issued an apology to the Holloway family and his own family. He said, "I'm no longer the person I was back then." Well, his stunning admission ended an ordeal that started one hot night nearly 20 years ago on the Caribbean island of Aruba. Gorgeous 18-year-old Natalee Holloway was on a celebratory vacation with her fellow graduates from Mountain Brook High School in a suburb of Birmingham. And of course, she was more concerned about having fun than anything else. The blonde-haired, blue-eyed teen, member of the dance squad, known to her friends as Hootie Hoo, was last seen, as I said, about 1:30 in the morning, May 30th, 2005, sitting in a car with 3 men outside Carlos and Charlie's club in Aruba. Based on eyewitness reports, police arrested van der Sloot, a Dutch national attending school in Aruba. And they first denied knowing anything at all about Holloway, but then confirmed that he and 2 friends, brothers, had driven around Holloway before dropping her off at the Holiday Inn. Over the years, van der Sloot and his friends were arrested and released multiple times for lack of evidence. Then, 5 years after Holloway's disappearance, an FBI sting operation secretly recorded van der Sloot pressing Holloway's mother, Beth Holloway, to pay him $250,000 in exchange for revealing the location of her daughter's body. Well, certainly if he hadn't been involved in her disappearance, he wouldn't know where the body was. Just before he was arrested for extortion, he slipped away to Peru, where he got involved in drug dealing and went on to murder Stephanie Flores Ramirez, a 21-year-old woman he met in a casino. Well, he was caught for that killing. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison. Well, there's another 18 years for trafficking cocaine while in prison, but faced no charges in the Holloway case till June of 2023, when he was extradited to the U.S. and reached a plea deal in the extortion case, getting another 20 years of prison time, and eventually he agreed to reveal what happened that night in Aruba. According to van der Sloot, he and Holloway had been kissing on the beach when he tried feeling her up. When she kneed him in the crotch, he kicked her in the face extremely hard. While she was lying down and on the beach, he bashed her head in with a cinder block before dumping her body in the ocean. Now, although the statute of limitations for murder in Aruba had already run out, authorities say they may still find a way to charge him. Though the Holloway family said they were satisfied that he had just confessed. Her mother said, as far as I'm concerned, it's over. She told reporters outside the federal courthouse in Alabama, "Joran van der Sloot's no longer the suspect in my daughter's murder. He is the killer." Well, Holloway wasn't the only murder to take place in Aruba. 2011, 6 years after Natalee Holloway went missing in Aruba, another beautiful woman disappeared from the island. Robyn Gardner, 35, of Frederick, Maryland. She told her boyfriend she was taking a trip to Orlando, Florida with her parents. Instead, she secretly flew to Aruba with Gary Giordano, a 50-year-old businessman that she'd met online. He paid for the trip and took out a $1.5 million insurance policy on Gardner that covered accidental death, listed himself as the beneficiary. Police arrested Giordano and held him in jail for 4 months before releasing him for lack of evidence. And he's always proclaimed his innocence, saying Gardner drowned in dangerous riptides while they were snorkeling. He tried to collect on the missing woman's insurance policy 2 days after he notified police about her disappearance. In 2012, he filed a $3.5 million lawsuit against American Express because they didn't pay him. The company countersued, and the Moco Show reported in January 2024 he had not yet received any of the insurance money. He claims he paid the premiums. He is entitled to the money. Well, sometimes it's not just a pretty girl that disappears. How about a couple? After pregnant Brittany Royal went missing, police feared she and her boyfriend both had been killed by locals. Described as a California free spirit who loved to travel, Brittany Jane Royal fell in love with a man she thought was a kindred spirit, Alaskan Boaz Bo Johnson. They met when they were both visiting Hawaii's Big Island in January 2013. Living in a tent on a vast rocky lava field, Johnson, 22, spoke about plans to own an organic farm and operate tours of the lava fields. Royal, 25, fell deeply in love with him, and before you know it, she was pregnant. Well, shortly after the couple returned to Hawaii from a trip to the mainland to tell their families about the baby, they both went missing. Royal's body was scooped up with a fisherman's net. She'd been strangled. But there was no sign of Johnson to be found anywhere. Police considered the possibility that the couple was killed in a business dispute after anonymous notes were sent to local media and outlets and posted around the island complaining about Johnson's plans to compete against local lava field tour guides. But on January 2nd, 2014, Johnson's body was found in a grove not far from the campsite. He'd hung himself with a rope similar to the one used to strangle Royal and left a 3-page suicide letter in a notebook found near his body. In the letter, he admitted to killing the mom-to-be and throwing her body in the ocean in what the police called a domestic dispute. Royal's parents were relieved to finally discover the truth, but her mother, Julie Swan Royal, told Hawaiian TV station KGMB, when it's somebody who knew her, loved her, and was going to be the father of her child, it's certainly heartbreaking. Well, signs have been posted over the island prior to the confession, asking the killer to come forward and confess. Turns out that Brittany Royal and Boaz Johnson planned to name their baby Io after the Hawaiian hawk. It's interesting that how it all, what goes around comes around, so to speak. Well, sometimes it's not just one victim, it's multiple. I'm talking about the Honolulu Strangler, believed to have raped and murdered at least 5 women, possibly more. Vicky Gail Purdy went out clubbing in Waikiki, May 1985, and never came home. Next morning, a 25-year-old's body is found on a lagoon embankment, her hands tied behind her back. She'd been raped and strangled. Her husband, an Army helicopter pilot, suspected her murder was tied to her job at a video rental store, where 2 other women had been murdered the year before. But then 7 months later, January 1986, 17-year-old high school student Regina Sakamoto was raped and strangled. Her body also found dumped with her hands bound. Well, the Hawaii police naturally figured a serial killer was on the prowl. Their suspicions were confirmed just 2 weeks later when telephone company worker Denise Hughes, 21, was also bound, raped, strangled, and dumped. Followed 3 months later by the similar style murder of 25-year-old Louise Medeiros. Good Lord. And in April 1986, when a fifth woman, Wanda Pesci, went missing, police got what looked like the most unusual break. When a man named Howard Gay reported that a psychic told him the 36-year-old's body was dumped at Sand Island. Well, after her remains were located on Sand Island, he was arrested for her murder and named top suspect in the other killings. And, as is usually the case, evidence seemed to pile up against him. 43-year-old worked at an air freight carrier that used zip ties like the ones that were found on the victims. He also failed a polygraph and had no alibi. His girlfriend said he was out the nights of the murders, and he made odd comments to the media saying the police had a good cause to arrest him based on circumstantial evidence. But authorities said they still didn't have enough evidence to make a case, so they released him. He died in 2003 after never having been tried. He was... It's interesting to note the similarities between the bodies. So clearly we're dealing with a serial killer. The issue is, who was the serial killer? Well, from Waikiki, let's go to one of the Greek islands, where a hotel worker was strangled on a Greek island. Anastazia Rubinska's killer cut off her fingers before dumping her body in a salt marsh. She was a beautiful blonde hotel worker from Poland. Spent her day off at a local bar on the Greek island of Kos. Picture postcard Mediterranean playground. Had hotels, restaurants, and a bar street lined with nightclubs. During the evening of June 12, 2023, she texted her live-in boyfriend asking him to pick her up because she felt uncomfortable. Then she sent a almost immediate follow-up message saying he didn't have to. She had drunk too much and be getting a ride home from somebody. But she never made it home. Her boyfriend called the police, who discovered that she'd been hanging out with 5 men. One of them reportedly confessed that he had sex with her. When police searched his room, they reportedly found a shirt stained with blood containing the 27-year-old's DNA. It was a plane ticket to Italy bought the day after her disappearance. Several days later, during an intensive search, Rubinska's body was found about a half mile from the man's home. She was nude and wrapped in a bed sheet and covered in a plastic bag. Some of her fingers had been cut off, and what police said was an attempt to make it more difficult to identify her. A subsequent autopsy determined she'd been strangled and likely sexually assaulted. Well, police arrested the man identified as Salahuddin S., a 32-year-old immigrant from Bangladesh, who changed his story and denied having sex with her, and saying instead that she was at his home to buy hashish. Murder set off a firestorm in Poland when the Prime Minister said he was shocked by her murder and demanded that Greece extradite the suspect to stand before a Polish court and receive the highest possible sentence. In December 2024, a Greek court found him guilty and sentenced him to life in prison. It didn't really satisfy the folks back home in Poland, but it certainly was punishment. Well, from the Greek islands, let's go to Bali. The trip was supposed to make things better between the two. 2014, Sheila von Wiese-Mack, the socialite widow of jazz musician and composer James Mack, and her daughter, Heather Mack, traveled first class to Indonesia to stay in the luxurious St. Regis Bali Resort. Mother and daughter had been at blows for years, with some 86 police calls to their home for domestic violence between 2004 and 2013. Nearly all the violence inflicted by the 19-year-old Mack, who allegedly punched and bit her mother, broke von Wiese-Mack's arm, and once ripped away the phone cord so she couldn't call 911. Well, Mack didn't have reconciliation on her mind, didn't Bobby? Instead, she stole her mother's credit card and booked a flight to Indonesia for her boyfriend, Tommy Schaefer, an unemployed self-styled rapper she knew from high school who went by the name of Tommy EXX. At the time, Mack was actually pregnant with Schaefer's baby. On the night of April 7, 2014, Mack and Schaefer put a suitcase inside the trunk of a cab and didn't come back. When the cab driver eventually called the police and they opened a suitcase, they found von Wiese-Mack's body stuffed inside. She was bloody, apparently been beaten. Charged with killing her mother to gain access to a $1.5 million trust fund, Mack was convicted of planning the murder, but not the killing herself. Schaefer was sentenced to 18 years for bludgeoning the woman to death with a fruit bowl. When she was released from prison in 2021 after serving 7 years of her 10-year sentence, Mack, with her then 6-year-old daughter, Stella, was deported to Chicago to face a stiffer charge of conspiring to murder a U.S. national. Mack pleaded guilty in January 2024 and admitted there's no excuse. She got sentenced to 26 years in prison. Schaefer was charged in the same U.S. indictment as still serving his sentence in Indonesia. He could be released in Indonesia as early as April of 2026, and then he'll have to face charges in Chicago. Well, let's talk about murder in Bermuda. On an extended vacation in Bermuda, Rebecca Middleton and her friend were waiting for a cab one night when two local men pulled up, one on a motorcycle and the other on a moped, and offered them rides. When naively trusting, the two teenagers agreed, and the friend, whose father lived on the island, made it home. Middleton was found the next morning on the side of the road, barely alive. She had been raped and stabbed more than 30 times. She unfortunately died before the paramedics could get there. Two men were arrested in July of 1996 for the murder of the Canadian teenager, Kirk Mundy and Justice Smith. But the case was soon beset with problems. And although the DNA evidence would show it was Mundy, who was 21, who raped Middleton, prosecutors cut a deal with Mundy to testify against Smith, 19, in exchange for pleading guilty to a lesser charge of being an accessory. Mundy, who at that time was out on bail for armed robbery of a bank vehicle, took up the offer. But the trial ended with the judge finding there wasn't enough evidence against Smith and ordered the jury to acquit. Mundy only served a little time and Smith walked, neither to be tried again due to the double jeopardy protections. As final insult, Bermuda offered financial compensation to the Middletons 10 years later. Offered them $2,840.63. It's just amazing how people get away with things like that. If you know the right people and you got money, you can pretty much do anything you want to do. Well, let's talk about murder in St. Martin. It was a married couple, Frank and Leta Cortez, ran a computer animation business together out of their townhouse in Mission Viejo, California. I know it well. I used to live there. German-born computer programmer with a low-key personality, Frank handled the technical side of things, while his vivacious American wife of 20 years managed their clients. Their business thrived, but their marriage was a little rocky. Reportedly hooked on prescription pills and booze, Leta had an affair with a younger man. When her husband found out, she was said to have suggested he sleep with her friend to make it even. Hoping to salvage what was left of their marriage, the couple built their dream vacation home in St. Martin's and regularly visited the Caribbean island. On the trip in January 2008, they had drinks one night at a friend's house. When they got home, Frank later recalled that Leta wanted to take the car to a casino, but he told her she was too drunk. So she left the house on foot shortly before 11 p.m. for a 10-minute walk to the casino. Never seen again. Well, after Frank reported her missing in the morning, authorities launched a massive search and showed her photo all over the island, but couldn't find any trace of her. Then about 10 months later, Frank was arrested in October 2008 as the sole suspect in his wife's disappearance. Police theorized Leta accidentally died during a fight with her husband, and in a panic he hid the body. Authorities noted Frank never expressed any emotion over his wife's disappearance. When he was interviewed by Dateline, he said, "I grieve in private. I don't cry in public." Well, Frank strongly denied the allegations, insisting his neighbors have overheard a violent fight, and he was released after 3 months in detention for lack of evidence and not been any discussion of being prosecuted. According to her friend, Carrie Honstein, she didn't go up in space and disappear. We know that the inevitable has happened. She's no longer with us. It's just been too long. Of course, if she ran off with somebody else, it could certainly have played out the way it did. Well, let's talk about what you might refer to as death cruises. Now, from the very beginning, the cruise that Anastasia's book for May 2006 didn't make a lot of sense. The ship was second-rate, more of a converted ferry than an ocean liner. Now, just getting to the Spanish dock was going to be a chore. It was a convoluted itinerary with flights hopping from L.A. to Minneapolis to London to Spain. And even more puzzling was his traveling companion. It was his ex-wife, Miki Kanasaki. By all accounts, they hated each other. Married from 1995 to 2002, the pair had been bitterly sparring for years over splitting their marital assets. Kakante has even romantically moved on, marrying another woman named Amy Nguyen. Well, apparently, Miki Kanasaki thought she was rekindling her relationship with her ex-husband. But that wasn't quite what was on his mind. Four years after their divorce, there they were, setting sail on a cruise of the Mediterranean Sea. And at first, it did appear to be a pleasant trip. On their first day out, they took a scenic shore excursion to Sicily, then came back to the ship for a romantic dinner over wine, followed by gambling and a show. Next morning, Kakante says he woke up about 4:30 in the morning, and Kanasaki wasn't in their stateroom. He reported her missing and told authorities she may have gotten sick from too much wine and fell overboard while leaning too far over the rail to vomit. Well, he didn't seem to be overly concerned about her. Spent a night in a hotel before returning home to L.A. while the search for her continued. And 2 days after her disappearance, the 52-year-old's body turned up in Italian waters. Well, autopsy showed she hadn't drowned. There's no water in her lungs, but instead she had a neck hemorrhage and bruising, suggesting she was strangled and had broken neck bone consistent with her head snapping when she hit the water in a fall. In other words, there doesn't appear to have been any doubt that Kanasaki was murdered. As authorities looked into Kakante's and ex-wife finances, they believed they found a motive. He wanted to get back about $2 million in cash and property that she had kept in a divorce, and he launched an elaborate plot to smooth things over with her and strike when she least suspected it. Well, when the detectives talked to his current wife, Nguyen, they found out that Kakate had left her and moved back in with Kanasaki, and then changed her will, making him the executor of Kanasaki's estate in the event of her death. So he was arrested when Nguyen turned on him and cooperated with the police, allegedly prompted him to hire a hitman to kill her. It was June 2020. Kakantes was convicted of murder with a special circumstance allegation of murder for financial gain. And the murder for hire charges were dropped since he was already getting sentenced to life without the possibility of parole for Kanasaki's murder, though he did have to face the wrath of her family at his sentencing. His little sister stared him down and said, "You're rotten to the core. I never want to see you again." Well, his general attitude was, though, if you can't take a joke. Well, during an Alaskan cruise with her 3 daughters and extended family in 2017, Christy Manzanares of Santa Clara, Utah, told her real estate agent husband, Kenneth, that she wanted him off the ship and out of their marriage. Enraged, he told his 2 daughters to leave the room on the Emerald Princess, and then he beat his wife to death, dragging her body to the balcony before family members could call security. Pleading guilty to second-degree murder, the 43-year-old appealed for a relatively light 7-year sentence, claiming he suffered both undisclosed bipolar disorder and brain damage from contact sports. After listening to all the evidence, the judge slapped him with 30 years in prison. He died by suicide in jail in 2021. Well, they want to do the crime, but they don't want to do the time, seems to be the issue here. Well, got a case of a birthday trip turning deadly. Tamara Tucker's boyfriend pushed her over the railing of their cruise ship during a drunken argument. There's going to be a special birthday getaway for a special woman. She's from Kansas City, Missouri. Spent a decade as a professor of social work, advocating for justice for those most vulnerable, and served as a program director of a child abuse prevention organization. To celebrate her 50th birthday, her longtime boyfriend, Eric Newman of Topeka, Kansas, booked a 4-day cruise to the Bahamas. But only a few hours after departing from Jacksonville, Florida at about 12:15 in the morning, this was January 19th, 2018, the Carnival Elation ship was in international waters off the coast of Florida when fellow passengers heard a horrifying sound. She had plunged 2 floors from the couple's stateroom on the 13th deck. The ship's medical officer responded immediately, but unfortunately, according to Carnival, she had already passed away. The FBI, who, when they want to, can actually conduct a serious investigation, found that Tucker and her boyfriend had gotten into an argument shortly before midnight. Newman, 53, grabbed her neck and pushed her over the cabin room balcony railing. Died of blunt force trauma on impact. Arrested in September 2018, Newman pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, although he insisted he had killed his girlfriend by accident while both were drunk. Tucker's blood alcohol level was 0.22%, nearly triple the legal limit for driving. Newman was never tested, but witnesses say he appeared heavily intoxicated. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison while friends and family struggled to cope with the fact that a woman who was an outspoken advocate for victims of abuse was killed by the man she apparently loved. Sometimes you just don't see it coming. Well, let's talk about somebody who died from a date rape drug. She's found unconscious in a man's cabin after a night of partying. She was described by everybody who knew her as a straight-laced mother of 3. And she decided just this one time to cut loose, saving up for 3 years to treat herself to a 10-day cruise through the South Pacific on board the Pacific Sky ship from P&O Cruises, which had a reputation for a hedonistic atmosphere. And cut loose she did, by all accounts, shortly after the 42-year-old boarded the Pacific Sky with 12 of her family members, including her sister, niece, and 12-year-old daughter. This was September 23rd, 2002. She began partying hard in a disco with several men she had just met. Had sex with at least one of them, and throughout the night, bystanders photographed her in various states of undress and consciousness. Her family later described the behavior as totally out of character for a woman they said was conservative and prudish when it came to romance. Then barely 24 hours after the ship departed Sydney, Australia, she was found unconscious of a drug overdose on the floor of a man's fourth berth cabin. Autopsy showed she had died of a lethal combination of date rape drug, GHB, and alcohol. One of the men that partied with her, Mark Wilhelm, admitted to providing the drug to her and having sex with her, but he claimed she took the drug voluntarily and the sex was consensual. He also revealed he had showered and dressed a naked and unconscious woman before calling for medical help. Witnesses later told an inquest that he showed them digital photos of himself having sex with Brimble on the night she died. According to her ex-husband, she is a woman who was put in an appalling set of circumstances. She has a dignity that should be protected. 2010, Wilhelm pleaded guilty to manslaughter, but to the shock of the woman's family, the judge rejected the plea, said there was no evidence to support it. Later pleaded guilty to the lesser offense of supplying the drug that killed Brimble. Two other men got non-jail sentences for hindering the investigation. But for Brimble, there was no justice. Whoever killed her never faced punishment for it. Well, sometimes couples get together, go apart, get back together. In this particular case, childhood sweethearts, Robert and Shirley McGill, celebrating their birthdays when she had just retired, when he suddenly snapped. Now, by all accounts, he loved her with all his heart. That's how a friend of Robert McGill summed up McGill's feelings for his wife, Shirley. The pair had met in high school, been high school sweethearts, reconnected decades later on the internet. They married in 2003. 6 years later, to mark their 55th birthdays, the couple from LA's San Fernando Valley booked a cruise aboard the Carnival Elation in Mexico. On the night of July 14, 2009, Robert's birthday, and 3 days into the 5-day cruise, he went up on deck, got into a chair, lit a cigar, and started throwing back beers from a bucket. When another couple who had spent time with the McGills asked where his wife was, he very calmly said, "Oh, she's dead. I killed her." After the stunned pair alerted the ship's security, her body was found in a pool of her own blood in the McGill stateroom. Robert later told investigators he'd killed his wife in the bathroom by beating her to death with my fist. But he couldn't remember any of the details. Witnesses said he appeared to be extremely drunk that night, and he told FBI investigators he hallucinated after drinking a half bottle of mezcal and 7 or 8 beers. He said he believed that a scorpion that was in the mezcal bottle had set him off. Coroner found Shirley dead of strangulation and blunt force trauma in 2010. Robert pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He apologized at his sentencing, but didn't explain why he killed his wife. He said, "I know I've done a horrible thing." And their friends were baffled. Shirley had just retired from the DMV, and her husband was planning an early retirement from teaching at-risk teens. As their neighbor told the Associated Press, Bob and Shirley never said anything negative about each other. Nobody could understand how all this came about. And the mere fact that it's unexplainable doesn't make it any less deadly. Well, sometimes we don't know what happened to the victim. Amy Lynn Bradley vanished while on a trip to the Caribbean with her family. She was a gifted athlete, gone to college on a basketball scholarship, and was a powerful swimmer who had worked as a lifeguard. So when a 23-year-old from Chesterfield County, Virginia, vanished during a Caribbean cruise in 1998, Those who knew her best refused to believe she could have drowned after falling overboard. She'd been on board the Royal Caribbean ship Rhapsody of the Seas, cruising with her family from Aruba to Curacao. Shortly after midnight, March 23rd, 1998, 2 days into the cruise, she and her younger brother Brad hit the Mardi Gras nightclub where she danced and drank and partied with a member of the band Blue Orchid until 1 in the morning. Her brother went back to the family's cabin at 3:35 in the morning, according to the computerized lock system, and she followed him 5 minutes later. About 5:30 in the morning, their father Ron woke up and saw his daughter zonked on a lounge chair on the balcony, her brother asleep in bed. When the father got up a half hour later, she was gone. And after she couldn't be found on board the ship, authorities launched a 4-day search of the waters without finding any trace of her. Authorities suggested she might have jumped overboard in a suicide. Her family speculated she either fell accidentally overboard or was pushed, but then she would have been able to swim to a nearby island. Then things took a bizarre, disturbing turn when eyewitness accounts and evidence suggested she was kidnapped by sex traffickers. 2 men say a woman resembling Bradley appeared frightened as she was being escorted by 2 men on the beach of Curacao. Other witnesses reported seeing a woman who could have been her in a department store and also in a Bahamian brothel. Then the family got a photo in the mail of a woman who looked like their daughter, appearing dazed and dressed in lingerie that had been posted on a website for sex holidays in the Caribbean. Well, the FBI continues to search for Bradley and is offering a reward of up to $25,000 for any information leading to her recovery, as well as tips that lead to the arrest and conviction of the persons responsible for her disappearance. So could she have been kidnapped off a cruise ship? Certainly, I've heard other similar stories. While the Caribbean is made up to be a paradise, there's a lot of there's a dark side, I guess you could say. Well, there's another story. An Ohio couple were found in their bloody stateroom in what appeared to be a murder-suicide. Darla Mellinger and John Banner from Salem, Ohio, were married on October 2nd, 2014 at the Salem Historical Society's Heritage Gardens. They were both in their mid-50s, both retired, seemingly madly in love. According to the wedding announcement, the groom had proposed to his bride during a sunset carriage ride at Passion Island in Cozumel, Mexico, and they spent their honeymoon on a cruise through the French Polynesia. A few weeks after they got back, in December 2014, something odd happened. Detective Dave Talbert was called to the Banner's home to investigate what the pair called a freak accident. According to the newlyweds, Darla tripped over a throw rug and fell onto an old war relic dagger that John was looking at. Treated at the hospital for a minor stab wound to the chest and released. Although the story sounded a little strange to Talbert, the couple agreed on the details, so he didn't take any action. Well, the police had all but forgotten about it until Talbot was reading the newspaper 5 months later. There was a news account about the Banners taking another cruise, this one on the Holland American ship NS Rendam, that departed Tampa, Florida, March 29, 2015. It was going to be a 14-day voyage around the Southern Caribbean. Well, on April 2nd, the ship was docked in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and a cleaning crew found the Banners dead in their blood-soaked stateroom. Talbert later did an interview with WKBN and said, "I knew this name sounded familiar." And so did the details surrounding what had just happened to the pair. Well, investigation later determined that John had stabbed his wife to death and then killed himself. And the weapon? The knife. Sometimes freak accidents happen more than once. Well, let's talk about what happens when people are lost at sea. The question is, did they disappear in accidents or was it somehow foul play? Rebecca Coram, a British youth activity worker on the Disney Wonder ship, disappeared in 2011 during a Mexican cruise. Disney Cruise Line officials theorized that the 24-year-old was washed overboard by a high wave while she was swimming in the ship's pool. But after security video showed her emotionally upset while making a phone call in the crew area just hours before she went missing, the family came to believe that she may have been attacked and thrown overboard. Family settled out of court with Disney for an undisclosed amount in 2015. But the question still remains. What happened to Rebecca Coram? Let's talk about Annette Meisner of Waukesha, Wisconsin. Brought her parents and teenage daughter along on a 9-day carnival cruise to the Mexican Riviera in 2004. She'd won the trip as a prize in a competition. After spending the evening belting out a Brittany Spears song at a karaoke night with her daughter, the 37-year-old hit the casino and planned to meet her parents later for bingo. But she never showed up. Her damaged beaded purse was discovered near a railing on the lower deck. But she was never found. Authorities say she may have fallen or been pushed overboard. Her father, Waldemar Kurtler, said we'd give anything to see Annette alive again. Of course, the question becomes, what happened to her? Another case, which took place during a Caribbean cruise. The cruise had been given to the couple by their children for Mother's Day. Hugh Pham, 70, and Hugh Trine, 65, disappeared in 2005 from the Carnival cruise ship Destiny, somewhere between Barbados and Aruba. The shoes of the married couple of 50 years are found on the deck, but otherwise there was no hint as to what happened, leaving their son angry and frustrated with the cruise line for not keeping his parents safe. He said, "I'm not against the cruise industry," he told a congressional panel, considering tighter regulations of the industry, but till they admit they got a problem, nothing's going to get done. Of course, the question is what happened to his parents. Sometimes, even going by yourself doesn't make you safe. Traveling alone on an Egyptian cruise in 2011, bookshop owner John Halford of Milton Keynes in England texted his wife on the final day of the voyage to say he'd see her the next day at the airport. But then he vanished from the cruise ship. Authorities speculated that Halford, 63, was having marital problems, which is why he was on a solo cruise. Got drunk, either fell overboard or jumped into suicide. Body was never found. His wife was interviewed by the Daily Mail and said we're living a nightmare and we don't see a way out of it. It's so unreal, we can't even grieve. Well, there's always going to be people trying to explain away mysterious events such as happened to these people. We got time for one more. Sometimes newlyweds are so devoted to each other it's ridiculous, and other times, well, in this particular instance, Tina Watson's husband pled guilty to manslaughter after she died 11 days after their wedding. It takes an experienced scuba diver to reach the shipwreck Yongala, sitting on the ocean floor in Australia's Great Barrier Reef, and Tina Watson was no experienced diver. She was 26 years old from Helena, Alabama. She was young and adventurous, determined to make her honeymoon memorable. Besides her new husband and dive partner, Gabe Watson was an accomplished diver, and she knew he'd watch out for her. Morning of October 22nd, 2003, 11 days after their wedding, the couple jumped into the clear blue water off the shore of Townsville to explore the remains of the 50-foot steamer that went down in 1911. 2 minutes later, something went wrong. Tina lost consciousness and sank like a stone, 98 feet to the bottom. Her final moments were eerily captured on a photo taken by another diver who was taking a picture of his own wife and happened to get an image of Tina in the background, lying face up on the ocean floor. The problem is, how do you even investigate the crime scene? After 10 long minutes underwater, Tina was taken aboard another dive boat, but efforts to revive her failed. Autopsy the next day showed she died by drowning. Then the question started. Why didn't her husband do more to save her? During an investigation, he gave the prosecutor what the prosecutor said were 16 different explanations, none of them matching what the witnesses saw and was recorded by his own dive computer. He also exhibited what some described as a complete lack of grief. Originally charged with murder, he admitted he must have panicked during stronger than expected water currents and didn't do all he could have done to help his wife. Prosecutor said that Gabe didn't inflate his wife's voice or control device or remove her weight belt. Or didn't he share his oxygen with her? 2007, he eventually pleaded guilty to manslaughter and sentenced to 12 months in Australian jail. Term was extended for 18 months after a failed appeal. Well, her family expressed outrage at what they saw as a slap on the wrist. The prosecutor contended the evidence was the best it could become within the circumstances. He said, given the complex circumstantial nature of the case, Mr. Watson's admission he had breached his duty to render assistance to his wife ultimately meant that there was no reasonable prospect of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that he was guilty of murder. But her family was unwavering in their belief that Gabe was a murderer. Family members found he had upped Tina's life insurance before her death, and they claimed he never showed any signs of grief. After he was released in 2010, he was charged with murder in his home state of Alabama. But in 2012, the judge dismissed the case due to the lack of evidence against him after new information surfaced that Tina suffered a heart condition that she kept secret from him. The expert said she wasn't fit to dive without a doctor's clearance, something she did not have. No longer facing charges in her death, he has expressed remorse, telling 2020 during an interview, "I don't think I was making rational choices when she got into trouble, but added, I don't know that I could have done what I could have done had I stayed with her. I don't know there's anything that I was actually capable of doing." And one last story. Amanda Waller was snorkeling with her husband, Alan Waller, and large group of friends during a dream vacation to Curacao in 2015 when she vanished. After the group couldn't find the 28-year-old anywhere in the water, they called in the Coast Guard, which, along with the Marines and other authorities, searched by air and with divers and couldn't find any trace of the Katy, Texas woman. After 72 hours, the search was called off, and her fate remains a mystery. I don't want to speculate on what I believe happened. Her husband told KTRK-TV in Houston, "I just have faith she's in God's hands now." I think I would have looked under every seashell in the entire area to find out what happened to my wife. Well, on that note, we come to the end of today's show. We'll be back to Monday. This is Friday, when once again we'll be talking about unsolved mysteries and lost treasures and maybe more murders in paradise. Who knows? Until then, Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.